My people, my people, my people, my people, my people, my people, my people. Welcome to another episode of Don't Forget to Flush podcast. I know, but this time you'll be like, hold on, I can't see the relationship between the name of the show because there's nobody flushing any toilets. But that's how we get into your mind because this show is all about you thinking about what we're saying and then taking the old thoughts you have, throwing it into the trash on the toilet, as the case may be, and flushing it. Or maybe we don't make sense, so flush us, but no problem. But the point is, welcome to Don't Forget to Flush. We're glad to have you listening to us. And I'm very excited for the guests that I have on this time. This podcast is all about bringing all the other elements of the rising tide of African Africans in the diaspora doing big things, leading to this African Renaissance, giving us an opportunity to talk about the culture, and the most importantly, putting them on the hot seat so that they talk to us about their toilet seat conversations. Very excited, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce my guest for today, none other than the powerful Black Girl Magic everything, Dominique Tolbert. How you doing, Dom?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Hey,
Always a pleasure.
I'm super excited in having you on. A part of me is like, anyone listening will be like, this guy is so excited, he's so loud, like he's so loud. But part of the reasons why I'm loud is because I have Dominique Tolbert right here. Like, if you talk about anyone who's built a business from scratch, there are quite a few. But in your case, your story is something that I want the world to hear. And I'm so grateful that you chose this opportunity to hang out with me on my crazy podcast to talk about Dominic Talbot and
Thank
everything
you.
belongs to now. So to get into it, I might as well tell my guests, my audience members, as it were, that hey, if you're listening, Dominic Talbert is the owner of a hospitality platform is what I'll use because it's like we'll get into the details, but you own is it Talbert Hospitality or
Yeah.
TLBRT? Like,
Tolbert, Tolbert Hospitality.
okay, great. You know what? Let me keep quiet. You tell us about it. Like, introduce Dominic Talbert. Just tell the listeners who you are.
Yeah, I'll definitely introduce myself. Again, thank you. This is if it were anybody else, I probably would have said no right now just because it's a very hectic time. And this is also the first time I've actually done an interview with a friend. So I'm a little
Hey,
nervous
hey,
because it's you and I'm like, who knows what he's gonna bring up, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm Dominique Tolbert. I'm the owner of Tolbert Hospitality. It's spelled TLBRT. So my last name without the vowels. And yeah, it's kind of stylized
hey,
like
that is
that.
so sweet.
Um,
Last name
yeah,
without
it's
the
an
vowel.
overall, yeah, the last name without the vowels. I like how it looks stylistically. I came up with the name like even before I launched the company, like years before. I just started like putting TLBRT on random things. I think I changed my Instagram handle to that before I even launched the company. And I was like, yeah, I'm starting my company. I'm gonna put my name on it in a way. No, that's how it happened. But it's a brand, it's a company that kind of encompasses hospitality at large, but hospitality surrounding food. And
Mhm.
so I bring people together around food, culture, conversation. It's a food and beverage company, so I cater and then I host up pop-up events and dining experiences and things like that under Tolbert Hospitality. So that's
You
a
know
little
what? You had me at food. When you said food, I was like, that's it. That's all we need to know about this platform because when you think hospitality from an African perspective, it's really food first, you know? So let's take a step back. How did you get into it? Because I know that in some other interviews and even on your website, you talk about the fact that this was from way back in 1993. Of course, it causes me to wonder how old you are now because I'm like you're barely 21, and I'm wondering that long ago, like what was the genesis for you? And guys, yes, I don't know. I think she's maybe above 21, but my point is 1993 sounds like a very long time. So
yeah,
what's
I'm
the
I'm older
backstory?
than 21, but it came. I say 1993 because that's when I was born. So I'm 27. And I think I don't really know when I started. cooking or when my love for cooking came about, but it was just always kind of there since I was a kid. I grew up. This is one thing I remember for sure. I grew up, and this was like maybe when I was 6 or 7,
Yeah.
maybe younger, just watching the Food Network all the time, and my cousins would be making fun of me for watching the Food Network. They're like, you don't watch like regular things. You just watch people cooking all
Yeah.
day. But that's what I liked. And so now everyone is like, "Oh, can you cook for me? Can you do this? Can you do this?" So like
Yeah.
that's why I say it started in 1993 because I think I was just
No.
always
Hey,
cooking, watching my aunts and them cook, and that's just how it happened.
no, that hey, there are enough people that use the same story. I mean, think about all these music artists. When they'll be like, "Hey, so when did you start singing?" They'll be like, "Oh, from my mother's womb." Or someone will be like, "Oh, I was singing before they even knew they were gonna have me." Like, people. But in your case, you actually have live experiences of being focused more around the Food Network, like you talked about, or cooking and meals. And so, I do know you are African. How
Yeah.
much of that influenced your pursuit, as it were? Was it like because of that, or was this like you were in a household where the opportunities was endless and it was like, hey, take whatever you want and make it what it is?
No, I don't think it was. So I'm Liberian. My family is Liberian. I'm first generation American. So I was born here. Both of my parents are the youngest of their siblings. So aside from basically my siblings and I, like all my other cousins were born back home. So we're the only ones who were really born here in the States.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was because I'm Liberian. That's why I decided to start cooking or pursue like culinary arts. That was actually it was not something that was encouraged by my parents necessarily because I was the one who was like, "Yeah, I want to go to culinary school." And they were like, "You want to do what?"
Wanna
Especially
do what?
that was not it because my mother, she has a background in engineering, my father in finance. One
Ooh.
thing that we do have a history of is having entrepreneurs in our family. So like entrepreneurship runs in our blood. But in terms of and then our family does have great cooks. I have cousins. There's if most people get me and her confused or they think I'm her daughter. I have a cousin, Rosemary Tolbert. She's in New
Okay.
York and she's like a great cook. She has a baking and pastry company.
Oh wow.
And so, that runs in our family, but it wasn't anything like somebody was like, yeah, go to culinary school and go have fun with that. It was like, no, you're gonna go to school and get a degree,
Yeah,
not go to.
that's the African thing, right? They'll be like, hey, you got to go get the degree first. You got to go to school first. You got
Yeah.
to go
So
to
I mean,
school
I
first.
went to school.
No, for sure. But you also studied, and that's the thing, right? There are people who would get into things like this and they don't use school to support it, right? They'll just be like, oh, this is something I know how to do. But you actually studied along these lines. Like you have a degree in hospitality.
Yeah, and so my choice to pursue a degree in hospitality was because it kind of, massaged two things. I kind of like pleased my parents in a sense. She's gonna go get a bachelor's degree that was kind of business related, but also more niche focused for me in hospitality, something that I enjoyed and something I was familiar with. And so I studied hotel and tourism management at NYU, and so I got my bachelor's degree in that. And food was always an integral part of everything that I did when I was in New York, especially just in the hospitality industry at large. Like I've worked for tourism trade bureaus, travel agencies, event companies that specialize in food focused productions. I did study abroad and I interned in Shanghai working at the Four Seasons in a food and beverage capacity. I did like a Cuba study abroad where I researched Cuban tourism industries that included focusing on something called paladares or restaurants that were operated outside of people's homes. And so like I always found a way
Oh,
to
did you say
integrate
Pelahu?
food
Pelahu?
paladares.
Now that's sweet. Say
I
it.
don't I'm not pronouncing it properly, but it's
No, but
Paladarres.
what's that about? You said it's like places that.
Yeah, so like in Cuba, the time that I went to Cuba, I don't remember what year it was. Maybe it was 2014 that I went. And so that's when Obama initiated, different measures to allow Americans to start traveling to Cuba because for a while it was
Yeah.
basically forbidden. People were going, they were doing it illegally. And so I went with a tourism professor of mine and classmates over the spring break. And so we went there, we traveled throughout Cuba. So we were in Havana, Havana Vieja, Santa Clara, Varadero, Cienfuegos, Trinidad, like to so many different cities throughout Cuba. So we saw a lot of the country. And one thing that we focused on was, looking at the restaurant or looking at the food and beverage industry. So going to restaurants owned by the government, also going to restaurants called paladares, which were operated out of people's homes. So they have restaurants, you're literally in somebody's house, probably eating
Wow.
dinner or lunch in their living room or wherever they could set up tables. I remember one time we went to some ranch in I think Cienfuegos, where this guy had a horse ranch and he basically made this huge barbecue for us. And so those were some of the concepts that we were researching to see, is that a viable option for tourism and economic development in the country outside of, what most of us know as restaurants, and how that structure is different than a traditional restaurant. So I don't know. I like to eat.
That is
I like
amazing. I can listen to this all day because it's like it's one thing to eat the food, which is my contribution in my own sphere of influence. I do enjoy the eating aspects of it, but when you're talking about all these other fascinating ideas of restaurants that are like people have restaurants in their own home as an
yeah.
idea or as a concept. Um, it makes me wonder though that is would you say that Tolbert Hospitality, who actually, your company actually has these intimate experiences that I've engaged with? Could you share with
Yeah.
us about that? What is that like for that aspect, the event side of what you do?
Yeah, for sure. And so I started doing this. So in many places in America, I think California might be one of the few places where it's allowed for you to actually have something in your home and sell tickets to and like make that a business. But
Mm,
in other cities, it's technically illegal. But when I was in college, I started doing something called Sunday dinner series. And so in the dorms where we were, we had kitchens when we were upperclassmen. And so I
yeah,
would invite some friends, friends would invite some friends, and I'll be like, just bring the drinks and bring the dessert. I'll fix the food. And
wow,
so it was a way for me to just, make a home cooked meal for people who were in college, whether at NYU or St. John's or LIU or wherever they were at,
yeah,
and then also bring people together from around the city. And so that's how I started doing like these dinner party concepts called Sunday dinner. And that was like my first experience with it.
yeah,
Um, After graduation, I actually moved out to Vegas and I started working as a restaurant manager with MGM Resorts. And it was cool to see another aspect of food and beverage, but I kept thinking about culinary arts and cooking and things like that. And coincidentally, like 2 weeks before I left Vegas, I had a chef I had worked with on the East Coast who came out to Vegas for fun. We met up and she was like, "Oh, there's a position open at Four Seasons in Baltimore for a cook. Just apply for it and see what happens." And so I applied for it. I got a call from HR manager. She was somebody that I had known from New York. And so it was just funny how everything aligned. And so I started cooking with the Four Seasons in Baltimore as a prep cook and then
yeah.
kind of working my way up. But going from management to a cook, like literally my salary got cut more than in half.
I'm just listening to you and wondering why someone will be
Yeah,
like, how did you move from why would you make that decision?
yeah.
Did we just talk about
Most people
Vegas now on top of everything else that you've and places you've been to? But what was that like though? What led to your decision to make that move?
I mean, I think I'm a person who takes chances or like calculated risk, and it was just more so about me wanting to pursue something that I was interested in instead of kind of putting it off even
Yeah,
more than I had already. Because if you, like I said, I wanted to go to culinary school and I never went to culinary school. And so it's like, okay, here's an opportunity for me to cook and to learn. And so there were two paths that I talked with different chefs about. It was like, okay, go to culinary school and pay to get that education again, or you can do like a stage throughout restaurants, which is training for free, or if you have an opportunity, just be a prep cook and learn in a restaurant. So this opportunity for prep cook came up. I'm not working for free. I'm getting paid, of course, not a lot, but it's like I'm not paying to go to school, but I'm learning for free essentially and getting paid to learn. And so that's how it happened. But with me not making any money. I said, "How can I make some money?" And so then I thought back on me doing like the Sunday dinners in New York. So I said, "Okay, I'm gonna start doing pop-up events in the DMV area and do like experiences that way." And so that's kind of how I bring everything together to say, I saw how successful it was to do these intimate types of events in New York City. And I wanted to recreate that experience in Baltimore, in the DMV, where I'm from, and then also where I was now living again. And so the first pop up event that I did was something called It's a Crab Feast. And so that was paying homage to Maryland crab season. But then also, I put my West African spin on it to say, this is going to be a family style crab feast. It's going to be multiple courses, kind of adding like that finer element to it. It's going to
Yeah,
be like some small plates and then like a big crab feast that's going to be dumped on the table. But at the same time, I'm going to make it like West African. So I'm going to bring in some flavors and ingredients that are indicative to Liberia and to West Africa. I'm going to create my own spice blend that is more West African. I'm not going to use like Old Bay. I'm going to create my own Old Bay. It's going to be called Better Than Old Bay.
yeah.
And so like that was the first thing that I did, and for that one, I had like 80 people come to it, and
I saw
so
the
it was
pictures from it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's such a novel idea.
yeah, so that was me like recreating this experience again and saying, how can I make money? How can I bring people together around food and culture?
Mhm.
How can I create an intimate experience where, people who don't know each other can come out being friends and joking or whatever else. And that's why I do everything family style, because I want people to have to ask the person next to them that they don't know to pass them a dish,
Yeah,
or to be arguing over the last bite of whatever else, because it's like, why not? I think food is about more than just eating. I think there's an experience to it. There's,
mm.
learning about other people's culture. There's sharing with others. And, that's what I try to recreate by doing the pop-up experiences.
You know what? You are blowing my mind. Like everything that you're talking about is like, it's hitting me hard because I'm like, this is a world that people are more used to just eating and not understanding some of the things that would go in through the mind of a chef. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been on Don't Forget to Flush podcast. Please do send us an email at don't forget to flush pod at gmail.com, or check us out on social media at Don't Forget to Flush. I mean, we're on Instagram, Twitter, and everywhere else. You can just type in or just Google us at this point. And I'm right here with the CEO of Tolbert Hospitality, as well as the CEO of Mesean Spices, right? Is it Mesean? Did I say it correctly?
Nishan, you're saying it right. Yeah.
Yeah, Mesean Spices. Now, I thank you for that last response because it's a great segue into this next segment about culture commentary. And it's
Mm,
full circle for me because when I started off this podcast in season one, episode 0, the first person I did talk to, Mike Zapsik, he's known through the Comic Book Man series on AMC, but he has a
okay.
background in the culinary arts, and he gave us
Okay.
this world of what it is like to be a chef and how cutthroat it is. And so this is like full circle that that's Mike, white dude, American, and now I'm speaking with Dominic, who's experienced this from a very academic, wise perspective of making our right steps and strategy. I'm long-winded to ask this question in this culture commentary aspect. What, from your perspective, what is, being in that business like for African Americans or Africans or people of color and minorities generally? Like, what's been your own story?
Yeah, I mean, my story is definitely not everyone's story. I think my story is very untraditional. Some I don't know if I've necessarily come to terms with how I got to where I am or how I've done it, but it's just a way that I did it. And, I will say in the hospitality industry in general, there are not a lot of Black people on, the management level. Of
Yeah.
course, in entry level positions, there are a lot of Black people, a lot of minorities, but once you get to upper level management, owners, and things like that, you don't really see a lot of us.
Mm.
In the kitchen, even more so, especially when it comes to restaurants that are more fine dining. Um, you just don't see a lot of us. In
Yeah.
the kitchen I was in, I was at the time I was there, not to say I was the only one. I was the only black woman there in the kitchen in any of the kitchen positions, like cooking for I think a year until another black woman came. I think there was somebody in pastry or two people in pastry, but I was the only one in the kitchen. And they were all men. So it was white men, black men, Hispanic men, Asian men, but I was the only black woman. And then there was only one other woman who was working on dinner service. So it was only two of us out of maybe 20 guys. And then all of our executive chefs were white men. I will say I was fortunate and lucky enough that I did not, my first kitchen experience was not a negative one in that I didn't have chefs who were like abusive and yelling
Yeah.
and cursing at you and things like that. So that wasn't my experience. I know it has been for a lot of people, but it wasn't mine. Um, I think also for me, and the other thing I've heard from others is, most likely or most times than not, if you are willing to just do the work, put your head down and do the work, you'll be fine. Not to say it's going to be easy, but there is a level of respect that comes from that.
Yeah.
And I think because for me, I came in there and they were like, okay, not that everyone knew, but it's like, okay, she came from NYU, one. She was a restaurant manager before when it's more times that somebody goes from being in the kitchen or back of the house to front of house.
Yeah.
Front of the house people don't technically typically go to the back of the house or to be in the kitchen. And so it's like, okay, she made a switch that's not common,
Mm.
and then she's like busting her ass to work from prep cook. Like prep cook is literally chopping up pounds, like
Yeah,
50
that is
pounds
like
of
the
vegetables all day, working with like 120 quart stock pots, making stocks and soups and sauces. Like
that is
that's
brutal
not
work. That is like that
it's
is back-breaking work. That is like
yeah.
the
Definitely the first week I did that, I was like, I did not have a body. I was like gone. And
did I
even
make the
after
right
that,
life choices?
yeah, I was
That
like,
is-
am I doing this? But it was definitely a physical workout. And times where I hadn't been in the kitchen, like if I left the kitchen for a week, I could feel it when I came back because it was like I hadn't been like exerting those muscles. But
Mm.
for me, that was my experience overall. And it's like I worked hard. I think I was in prep longer than I wanted to be. So I was there for about 6 months. Then I moved to going like a couple of days a week on lunch service and then other days on prep. And then I was like, I want to go to dinner service. And I kept asking and asking. So then they finally put me on shellfish station. You start there, shucking oysters, making like seafood. I hated shucking. Like there would be sometimes there was brunch service and I
Yeah.
would shuck oysters for like 6 hours out of the day. I
Oh
can
my
shuck an
God.
oyster, like I can do that all day, like in my sleep, but I hated it at first. And then cleaning oysters too. Oh my gosh. And so I
Man.
started on shellfish, moved to garde manger, which is basically any cold dishes, so salads,
Yeah.
any cold soups, any cold appetizers, if you have that. Then I went to hot apps, so it's working on hot appetizers. And then I was bouncing between hot apps and room service because the kitchen we were in was in a hotel. So
Yeah.
fulfilling room service orders as well as doing whatever came through on dinner. And then I did some other line before I left. And I think the only other line I had to do was to do, not, it wasn't the entree station, but it was a grill station. So like
Mm.
making all the steaks and things like that. I never got there. I left before that
Wow.
time.
Like in my mind, I'm like, all of this learning and all of this knowledge would surely help Talbert Hospitality in this area of catering. And I've seen the images from your pop-up events. I'm always like envious of the fact that I don't live close by, that I can just jump in, and sometimes I've even seen you say things like sold out, like so many tickets, it's already booked out. People are trying to get in. But real quick though, I need to get in on understanding more about Mesean Spices. Now, you own that company as well, and the proposition for it is fantastic. I mean, bringing West African spices or giving that kind of variety in the kitchen where it's not the usual McCormick or Lawry's or any of those big brand names, but things
Yeah.
that folks can relate with. But you did say in one of your interviews that it was an accident of sorts. Like there was an accidental approach or something that happened that led you down that path of owning a spice company. Tell me more about that, and what was that like?
Yeah, because So with Tolbert Hospitality, the reason why I left the kitchen was because the kitchen was bought out. And so once that happened, they didn't have a plan for us. And so for me, I was fortunate to have had this business where I was doing like the pop-ups here and there, taking smaller catering gigs. And so the business shut down like in the summer, and then later that summer I had a client in New York who was like, okay, I basically have all these events, I want you to cook for me. And so I started, like, that was my intro into full-time entrepreneurship, because I didn't have a job, but I had this side hustle that now became my main hustle, Tolbert Hospitality. And so with that, I pride myself, and for some it's a lot of work, it is a lot of work, but I make everything from scratch. So the sauces, dressings, marinades, spice blends,
Wow.
pretty much everything from scratch. And so making some of the spice blends, I noticed a lot of times clients would ask me, hey, you use something on the lamb, for example, or on these vegetables. What was that? Can you make extra? Can you leave it for me? And so, kind of just picking up on that, I said, I wonder how this would be received by others. And
Mm.
so last year, December, I did a test run of 4 spices. So it was three savory ones and one sweet, to see how other people would like it. And so I sold out of 200 jars of spices in like 2 months. And so that's why I say Mesean Spices was an accident, because I never planned on selling spices. I always thought like, okay, I'll have this catering company, I'll do the pop-up events,
Yeah.
maybe I'll do some other stuff, but I never thought to get into the product business. But then people kept asking me for the spices. And then COVID happened, and then it was like,
Everybody's
okay,
now at
I'm
home and
not
now they need
yeah, I'm not catering like that anymore. So, but people are cooking at home and looking for something different. And so that's kind of how it happened.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome stuff. That is, it's like one of those things where with all the training and lessons and everything that your entrepreneurship, the fact that you're currently doing your MBA as well, or are you done with the MBA? Because I'm like, my God, how many more things can you do, Dominic? Like, is the MBA still going or?
The MBA is still going. So it was a
Wow.
tough choice to pursue an MBA, especially at the point where business for Tolbert Hospitality was picking up. But somehow I was able to finesse a full scholarship to get an
See, this
MBA.
this is why it's black girl magic. I don't even know how to explain it because it's like you have a company, an entrepreneur, you're the CEO of two businesses, you're taking it off the ground, COVID hit, but you're right here on your second year doing an MBA. Like in my mind, I'm like, I'm just bow to the queen.
And
So
so,
let's do
yeah,
something fun.
I had to go. So I'm
Hey,
getting my MBA. I finish in May. Thankfully, because it's a challenge.
no, you are doing amazing. So let's do something fun, right? So this is the segment where we call the Dinkba and the Diva show. And fortunately, I'm Dinkba all the time because Dinkba in Igbo, which is from my part of the world in the eastern part of Nigeria, is about grown ass men. Now the diva piece is that I believe that black women like yourself, women generally, are superhuman. Like there's no other way to explain how you guys can pull this off. So with that in mind, I'm giving you the opportunity to pick any accent and respond to the question that I would ask along those lines. All right, so pick any accent. You ready? I'm going to be
Yeah,
my Dimba one, which is always the Igbo one. So I'm always going to be like, what are you talking about? But you have to pick yours. Ready?
I'm gonna be, because I heard somebody else do this, and so I said, okay, they got away with it. But my accents are terrible, so I'm gonna have to just
Okay.
go with how I talk. And
Wait,
that's
what?
that's how we're
Wait, what? What?
that's how we're gonna roll with this.
What are we? How is that? That is not an accent.
It's an accent, yeah.
No, thank you. Please, can you sort of switch it up? Give us something else. We're looking for anything else, and you can even do like three or four, all bad. We'll take it. But here it is though. You have. Oh, sorry. Let me switch mine up. Dom dom. Hey, dom dom. Dom, you're too much. Oh, Dom, you're doing well. So, Dom, with this thing that you're doing, TLBRT Hospitality, Mesean Spices, what is your mission really now that both of them have jammed? Because you started one and now this one is working. So, if you think about the future now, what should we be expecting in the jamming of these two businesses?
I can't compete with you now. I'm not even gonna lie. I cannot compete with you. In terms of the jamming of the two businesses,
The reason I asked
that's
it,
something.
just try a Liberian accent. You're
Oh,
Liberian. Just
yeah,
take
I'm a
it.
Liberian, and that's my knock. My Liberian accent is non-existent.
Yeah, just try. I'll take it. But go ahead though. What's the future like? What is the future like?
The future is I'm trying to work on what the future is gonna look like, because for me, the focus right now is Mesean Spices and really getting that business to a point where it's not self sufficient, but in a good place.
Yeah.
Tolbert Hospitality will probably always be around, but it was never my goal to be cooking forever.
Mhm.
It was definitely my goal to bring people together around food. And so I think a way that is more attainable is through a product based business and doing some other things.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of, giving others the tools to be able to create experiences in their homes themselves. And so one of those tools is Mesean Spices. And so that's really focusing on that product, getting that into as many kitchens as possible, and then also, rolling out more recipes and videos and demonstrations and just,
Yeah.
bringing people together around that. And
That's awesome.
that's how I'm bringing those two
So
businesses
how do we
together.
find you then? Because anyone who's listening right now will be like Mesean Spices, Tolbert Hospitality, Dominique Tolbert. This lady's phenomenal. Like, how do we? How? What are the touch points? Go ahead. Like, where can they catch up with all of
Yeah,
this?
you can find me everywhere. I'm not difficult to find. So websites, Mesean Spices, MESEAN
Mhm.
spices.com. Tolbert Hospitality, same thing, TLBRT hospitality.com. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm not active on Twitter, but
None
I'm
of
there.
us are. There's this guy that was called the president one time that spoiled it for everybody. So right now, nobody's on. Anybody who's on Twitter right now, I have questions about what the person
Yeah.
does for
I
me.
mean, Twitter would be goals, but I'm not there yet.
Well, we're all grinding.
Yeah.
So here is my fun as we begin to try to check out of this podcast is toilet seat conversations, because with everything that you've described, your journey has been extremely unique. Unique because it has the mixture of strategy, calculations, blessings, favors, connections, networking. And so anyone who's listening would want to know, for instance, like what kind of advice has colleagues or people in your life around you given you that has been the most beneficial to inspire someone who's listening and saying, you know what, I have to be like this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So the suc- the success is there. I'll admit to the success. It maybe sounds easy. It wasn't easy. And also, I know you mentioned something earlier, like, oh, you built this yourself and this and that. It's like, yeah, I invested my money. I invested my time into it. I didn't get handouts from anybody, but I do have a great support system. So my family is my support system. Still living at
Shout
home in
shout
a,
out to family.
that saves a lot of money and gives me money to reinvest into businesses.
That's
uh,
wisdom.
I have previous bosses that are like family to me that support me, whether through you know coming up with different ideas because they're entrepreneurs themselves.
Mhm.
I have academic faculty like the professor who took me to Cuba. I'm still in touch with him. And so, these are all people who are mentors in a sense and
Mhm.
who give me advice. And, some of the advice they give me is, look into your network. Always, see who you know and see, how you can be of value, but also how they can be of value to you. Never dismiss, the places that you've been. Another thing, like just saying dismiss, I have a friend, he's a poet. He's like, never dismiss the progress of a baby step. And, I think as an entrepreneur, especially, you are oftentimes looking at the end goal or the bigger picture and you're like, man, I'm not there yet. But each thing that you do is going to be adding up. It's a building block to get you to the next level, even if you see it or not. So no matter how big or how small that step is, always take that into account. And then also, just don't be afraid to try different things. Don't be afraid to go out there. And, that's one advice that a lot of people and a lot of mentors I have give me.
Yeah.
Just, try things. Don't be stupid. Don't be foolish. Um, definitely stay focused, minimize the distractions. But if you want to do something, just try it. Figure out the way to make it happen. It's easier said than done, but we only have one life to live.
Hey,
Yeah,
we should spend it making putting our best foot forward. I
yeah,
am all in with that. Wow, that's you pack like 27 different deep statements plus advices inside this short response that now I'm like somebody has to press rewind just to listen to everything again. But I think the fun one for me is the fact that you're like mix things up, switch things up, try things. And in my mind, I'm like, that is a Mesean Spice experience right there. Try out all the different spices, figure out which one you would like best on your food. And I know that is what you're asking everyone to do. So,
yeah. Try it all.
Dominic, try it all. Dominic, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Guys, if you're listening, I've been hanging out with Dominique Tolbert, Tolbert Hospitality, phenomenal woman. I mean, she's grabbing her MBA. She's in this industry that is as wild and as crazy. She's the CEO of Mesean Spices, which, guys, you have to check out the spice. You have to order. And you know what? I'm going to find a way of giving out those spices. We're going to talk offline and we're going to find out how we can give it out to people who listen to this episode. If they do send us an email at don't forget to flush pod@gmail.com. Once again, don't forget to flush the number 4, the number 2, flushpod@gmail.com. You could actually get one of Mesean Spices delivered to you. And so when you do send us an email, I don't even know. Everybody will now send me an email, and then how am I going to do with 1,000 orders? That wasn't a
Oh,
smart idea. Like I didn't really think it through.
we're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah, I didn't really think it through. But yes, and so it's going to be powered by Don't Forget to Flush Podcast. We're going to be giving away some spices. So maybe I should pick a finite number. We have 5 spices that we are going to give out to the first 5 people that listen to this episode and they send us an email with the spice choice. So the one way we'll know that you did visit the website or you did check out the handle of Mesean Spices is if you send us your request with the name of the flavor you want. So it means you must have visited the site. So I'm putting it out there. 5. And if you're listening to this episode 5 years from now, sorry, that happened 5 years ago. But we appreciate you, man. And by then, the company will be so big that you'll be like, wow, Namo was the first one who got her on before she hit CNN. And that was it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dominic, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
So
much.
much.
It's been a
How
pleasure.
do we get some of this food? Because we'll have to get into this shipping of food. You can't just be doing this by yourself, now, Dom. Eh? You have to find a way. You know what? Let's take it offline. Anyways, she's like, you can't put me on the spot like this, Mamo. Who can we give a shout out to? Shout out
Always
to.
putting me on the spot.
I know, and I know it. But anyways, thank you so much, guys. We're out. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Peace.